You're listening to Romancing in Paris on Paris Underground Radio.
Hello, and welcome to the Romancing in Paris podcast. I'm your host, Lily Heise. In this podcast, we'll be traveling around the city as I pick out my top romantic spots per arrondissement. You don't have to visit these places only as a couple. Exploring them can be the expression of your own love of Paris. Are you ready to get romancing in Paris? Hello, and welcome back to Romancing in Paris. In this episode, we hop back across the Seine River to the left bank. We'll be returning to the 5th arrondissement, which, in my opinion, is sadly underrated by Parisians. There's so much more to it than the over-touristy parts of the Latin Quarter near Saint-Michel. The district has plenty of hidden gems, many of which are romantic. In the podcast's first tour around the arrondissements, we visited one of my favorite quais in Paris, the Quai de la Tournelle, which runs along the Seine River, an ideal location for a romantic stroll or picnic. I had a little difficulty deciding which site to move on to for this episode, so I thought I would go back to the city's roots, way back to 2,000 years ago, right back to Roman Paris. Now, there isn't much left of Roman Paris, above ground, that is. However, there is a Roman site which has many of the characteristics I love. It's historic, it's hidden, and it's wonderfully romantic. Grab your chérie. We're going to Arènes de Lutèce. As many of you will recall from other episodes of Romancing in Paris and my other podcast, Paris Cachée, the Roman city of Paris, called Lutèce, or Lutèce in French, spread over the Sainte-Geneviève mountain. Today, the area extending from the south of the Seine at Ile de la Cité to a little beyond the Pantheon, occupying a large swath of what is now the 5th arrondissement. Poor Lutèce! The 10,000 to 12,000 strong city was virtually wiped to the ground, first by waves of barbarian invasions, then by the tides of time, the repurposing of its building materials, and the urbanism of the city. Well, the Arènes de Lutèce, the city's arena, was both adversely and positively affected by this. I'll be getting around to this in due course. What's fascinating is that a lot of Parisians don't even know of the arena's existence, or perhaps they vaguely heard of it, but mightn't have visited it. What's left of it is part of a hidden park, which we'll be visiting later on in the podcast. Like many cities of the Roman Empire, Lutèce had an amphitheater, which was built in the 1st century AD, something of a hybrid. It wasn't a complete ellipse, like the standard shape of a Colosseum in Roman times. One end of the structure was flat and had around a 40-meter-long raised stage, as Lutèce's arena was used for both gladiator spectacles and theatrical performances. The curved terrace seating could fit between 15,000 and 17,000 people, greater than the population of Lutèce, as its events would attract spectators from nearby towns and villages. It is assumed that there would have been a linen awning above it, which sheltered spectators from the hot summer sun, and from the top row of seating, one could see as far as the Seine River and the right bank beyond. Lutèce's glory began declining as of the late 3rd century AD, when barbarian invasions wreaked havoc on the area. The amphitheatre itself was sacked, and some of its stones were used to build the fortifications which once encircled and protected the Ile de la Cité. In 577, the Frankish king Chilperic I had the arena repaired, and performances once again resumed. However, at some unknown point these were stopped, and the poor site was used as a cemetery. That is, before it was filled in when the Philippe Auguste city wall was built nearby at the turn of the 13th century. Gone, disappeared into oblivion, except in name, as the surrounding area had bizarrely retained the nickname of Les Arènes, and it was such that the arena lay dormant for around 650 years. As we've discussed in other episodes of the podcast, the city of Paris went through a vast overhaul in the mid-19th century under Napoleon III and Prefect Baron Haussmann. This involved demolishing sections of the Old City and the construction of many big, wide avenues lined with elegant stone apartment buildings. One of these streets was begun here on the left bank in 1860, vaguely perpendicular to the newly widened Boulevard Saint-Germain. This was to become Rue Monge. As work proceeded, in 1869, the workers stumbled upon a first section of the arena. This was its northern side, which was thankfully excavated and salvaged by archaeologist Théodore Vaquier. Then, in the early 1880s, the Compagnie Générale des Omnibus was going to build a tramway depot next to Rue Monge, when the rest of the remains of the amphitheatre were rediscovered. The fervent conservationist writer Victor Hugo, who was partially responsible for saving Notre Dame 50 years earlier, was made aware of this significant discovery. He spearheaded a committee, La Société des Amis des Arènes, or the Association of the Friends of the Arena, which campaigned to have the site preserved. A man of passionate and convincing words, in July 1883, Hugo wrote a letter to the president of the Municipal Council of Paris with the objective of drawing his attention to the plight of the arena. It went as follows. Monsieur le Président, it isn't possible that Paris, the city of the future, renounces a living proof that it was a city of the past. The past leads to the future. The arena is an ancient sign of a great city. It is a sole and unique monument. Municipal council which decides to destroy it is destroying a part of itself. Preserve the arena of Lutèce. Preserve it at all costs. You would be doing a useful action, and, what is more important, you would be making a great example. I shake your hand. Victor Hugo. Well. Good old Victor Hugo saved the day. His words were listened to, and only a few days later the municipal council went about safeguarding the site, declaring it a national monument the next year in 1884. The first wave of restorations were opened as a public park in 1896. Although this was after Hugo's death in 1885, he must have gone to the grave, which so happens to be a few blocks away at the Pantheon, knowing that he'd achieved his goal of saving the arena. In 1916, when the aforementioned tram depot was closed down to make way for the new Metro Line 10, the rest of the site was excavated by doctor and anthropologist Jean-Louis Capitain. The park within which the arena is found, the Square Capitain, is named after him. Unfortunately, a section of the arena was not salvaged. Some of its stones are certainly beneath those Haussmannian buildings which line the Rue Monge and flank the park. If you're enjoying this episode of Romancing in Paris, you may also enjoy our sister podcast, Life in Diasporas. This insightful podcast studies what it means to be Black in a European country in the 21st century, through enlightened and thought-provoking discussions. Tune in to Life in Diasporas on Paris Underground Radio. Romancing in Paris will be right back after a word from our sponsors.
And now, back to Romancing in Paris.
As much as it's a shame that part of the complex was lost, at least a passageway was put between those Haussmannian buildings which enters the arena. This pops up suddenly as you're walking down the eastern side of Rue Monge at number 49. It makes for a wonderful surprise entrance to the site. So, when you're planning to visit the arena, be sure to not tell your chérie where you're going and simply slide into the passageway. The other entrance on Rue de Nevers, just outside one of the exits of Monge metro station on Line 7, is equally surprising. As you jut into the verdant lane, you have no idea what awaits you at the other end. So, no matter which entrance you take, you'll get plenty of oh-la-las from your sweetheart when you reach the marvelous and astonishing space. From the center of the arena, you can gaze around, taking in the rows of terrace seating. Above the seating, you will notice some trees. In fact, there is the small park around part of the arena, and this is actually key to why I find this venue so romantic. I recommend you spend some time exploring this. You can take the meandering path up to the top, where there's a hidden bench and other quiet spots. There are some other inviting benches around the upper part of the complex. Here you can take a lover's moment, or sit down right on the terrace seating, where you can look out and imagine what it must have been like to attend a gladiator event or play here. Today, gladiators have been replaced with pétanque and soccer players. Beside the occasional clack of the pétanque balls or children's laughter, a serene ambiance protected from the busy Rue Monge by that row of Haussmannian buildings reigns in the space. Before coming to the arena, you might like to pick up some picnic supplies on nearby Rue Mouffetard, a lovely market street which happens to be along what was the old road leading to Rome. Thank you for listening to this latest episode of Romancing in Paris. If you have a minute, please rate or review the podcast. It only takes a second, and it's extremely helpful for potential new listeners. If you would like to support the network, please see our Patreon page, which includes fantastic extras for its members. Until next time, happy romancing in Paris.
This episode of Romancing in Paris was produced by Jennifer Garrity for Paris Underground Radio. For more on this show and shows like it, please visit parisundergroundradio.com.